Hello. So what we're going to do in this particular video is create a WordPress site in Microsoft Azure. Now, you might have a pitch to make to a potential client or to show a proof of concept to a client in WordPress, and you don't want to be entangled in installing PHP and all the other requirements to get with a WordPress site up and running. You don't want to be installing MySQL and all those dependencies. So, can Azure help us? Let's find out. So, in this video, we're going to be creating, first of all, an app service, and then that app service is going to be connecting to a container instance. That container instance would be running a MySQL server, so we don't have to install anything on our side, and it will be publicly available, so our clients can have a URL, a public IP URL, even a fully qualified domain name that they can use to actually access the proof of concept. Okay, let's get right into it. First and foremost, let's create an app service. So you just go to search here and search for app service. You go to app services here. You click on create. After clicking on create, you'll get a few options here. In the basics tab, one thing that's always required when you create new resources is resource groups. Resource groups is quite explanatory, self-explanatory. It's where a number of resources are grouped together, are actually put or bundled together. So we're just going to select an already existing one. You can just create your own as well and provide a name. It doesn't require location. It'll just associate the resources location to that particular resource group. Okay, after you select your resource group, you're going to select a web app name. Um, you can just use anything unique. Let's say you want to consolidate news from Twitter and Google news feeds and other places. Now here, publish. This will determine whether we want to use code or a Docker image. Code can be from Bitbucket, can be from GitHub, can be from your own accessible repository location. So if you're hosting it in your own server, it must be accessible. That's when you can select code and you can select your runtime stack, the .NET 6 or Java or PHP and the likes. So you have all those options if you select code. But code would actually require us to prepare code, which is not what we want. We want to get out POC as soon as possible. So we're going to use a Docker container. The Docker container that we're going to create in this particular instance is a WordPress Docker container. So we're just going to select a region closest to our client, and then we're going to create a Linux plan here. The reason why it's a Linux plan, if we go to Docker Hub, and then we click on Explore, and we click on Search here, and we say WordPress. This is searching all available images. Now, a Docker image is just a prepared environment with dependencies that makes it easier for you to get up and running without configuring a particular environment. Okay, so if we go here and look at our tags, we can already see here that it's a Linux container, but if we go to tags and scroll to operating system or architecture, you'll see that it's Linux. All of them are Linux based. So that's how we knew that we must create a Linux container for our web app. Okay, let's continue. So it's Linux there. You can just select a Linux plan. You can create your own Linux plan as well. And let's just do that. ASP. This is South Africa. You can just use your company's naming standards for this. T. This one. V2. You can do this. Name like this. You can change the size. Now, this will determine how fast your app service will actually run. So if we select this one just for speed's sake, I'll select something. But remember, if the more powerful the size, the more expensive it is. So just keep that in mind. So we're just going to select 7 gigs of memory. These are quite expensive. I wouldn't really advise. I'd advise the basic tier in dev test, these basic ones. And you can go to additional options to view standard options as well. So if you click here, you'll see a few more standard options. We can actually just go with this as well. This basic tier, 7 gigs, just so we don't waste time. Okay, we go to the next tab. Now in this tab, we have under options here, we have an option of selecting a single container or using Docker Compose. Docker Compose being a tool to execute multiple containers and providing the ability for them to be in the same VNet so they can communicate with one another. So, but for our particular purpose, we just want a single container, and our source image is going to come from Docker Hub, which we saw here. You just have to search hub.docker.com. Okay, and then our access type is public, and the name of the image is WordPress. We can use the tag latest, actually updated 4 days ago. WordPress, and then colon, and then latest. Okay, monitoring. For now, we don't need any monitoring. This is when you want to set up application insights to get more information about your particular app service. Just gonna go to tags. We don't need tags as well. If you want to set up cost centers and ways to categorize your resources, you can just put in some metadata here. Okay, let's go to review and create. So it's still validating, just to verify that all of our information is correct. Okay, now we can create. Okay, now we can see that the deployment is in progress. While the deployment is in progress, this is one thing I like about Azure as well. We can create other deployments as well. Okay, now a dependency that we have is a MySQL database, and we're going to host our MySQL database in a container instance hosted in Microsoft Azure. Let's create it. You can just search for container instances and they'll pop up. Just click on it. You'll get to this window. Just create a container instance. Then, as always, we have to specify our resource group. From there onwards, we'll give our container a name, DB. Same region as our web app. We're going to our image source is going to be on Docker Hub as well, a publicly available image. The name of the image, as we mentioned before, you can just go to hub.docker.com. It's MySQL, and if you go to tags, you'll see that we have latest. So we'll just use the latest image. So it's MySQL and then latest. If we go to the operating system architecture, you see that it's Linux. So perfect. We're going to select Linux here. We can just change the size as well of the server that actually hosts this particular container instance. We just want 4 gigabytes instead of 1.5. One virtual CPU is enough for what we want to do. Okay, so this ideally should start up a container with the MySQL image, and then we should be able to access it. Let's see. This is very important, this particular tab. The networking tab set to public hints that we are going to be able to access this particular MySQL instance from a public IP address. If we didn't specify it as public and as private, we'd have to create some internal VNets and probably VNet peering as well, just to make sure that multiple applications are able to communicate with one another. And currently, Azure doesn't really support VNets for container instances. So yeah, that might be a bit of an issue. So we're just going to stay with public for now. Ports, we know one of the ports that MySQL uses for communication is 3306. We're going to put it in. Another port is 33060. Okay, so this part is sorted. Let's go to the advanced tab. In the advanced tab, we just a restart policy. So for those who are used to Kubernetes, you know this. What happens when your container goes down, whether to always restart it, just to restart it on failure. So yeah. And one other thing that's important is environmental variables. So we know that MySQL requires an environment variable. One in particular is mandatory. If we just go to description here, we scroll down a bit, the documentation should be thorough. There we go. So here's an example. By the way, we don't have to insert all of these. We just have to notice that this particular variable is mandatory. So we're just going to select this particular variable, copy it here. We can mark it as secure or not. Let's just make it as secure. Okay, just gonna put in a password here. Next tab, we already spoke about tags. Going to review and create. So it's still validating now. Aha, our validation is passed. Perfect. Let's just verify. We have 4 cores. It's a Linux based image. That's perfect. We're exposing port 80, port 3306, port 33060. And port 80 we don't really need to expose. Okay, everything's good and well. Let's create it. Okay, so if we while it's deploying, if we go here and navigate to app services, we can just search for it again. App services, you'll see that our web app that we created is running. Okay, let's just click on it and look at the status. Okay, the status is running. The location is perfect, exactly as we set it. We have a public URL now. We have a public URL that has been assigned to our app service, which is wonderful. Let's see what happens if we click it. Oh wow, it's loading. Okay, so just like that, after a few clicks and a few insertion of characters, we are able to get a publicly available, fully qualified domain name with a WordPress site running. So what we're going to do now is link this particular WordPress site with a container instance, right, which is running our database, our MySQL database. Let's go. Continue. This is where we're going to set up. It's even saying let's go as well. This is where we're going to set up our database. Okay. Now, the database host is something that we should get from our container instance. Let's see if we have it. We just go here, search for container instances. Aha, it's created now. Let's just verify that it's healthy. If we go to the container instance blade here, you'll see that it's saying container instances, but this is actually a container instance group. So it contains multiple instances. Okay, under settings, we'll go to containers. And here we see that the state is currently running. And we see that it started. So it pulled the image and then it actually started the container itself. This is perfect. Okay, let's go to overview now. If we go to the overview blade, see that everything is in order, it's running. The operating system is Linux. And now look at this, which is quite interesting. We have a publicly available IP address. Wonderful. So we're going to copy this particular IP address, and that's our host. Okay, our username was root. Our password was, okay, simple password. Okay, obviously you use a more complicated password than that, but some things are missed here. This is the database name which is required, and we never created any database. What are we going to do? Okay, one thing to do, remember this container instance is running a MySQL server, and we need a MySQL database. One way to do it is to SSH into the container instance. After remoting in, we create our database schema. Let's see how we achieve that. So go to containers, go to connect. Just going to expand this. Any would do, to be honest. Just going to use a random one. Okay. Now we have a shell here. Let's just verify. Perfect. We know that MySQL is recognized as a keyword, so we're going to connect. Username is root, and we're going to specify a password. We're going to enter our password. Perfect. Welcome to the MySQL monitor. Commands end with semicolon or /g or SQL connection ID 69. Perfect. So we have our SQL server running, and we're able to remote into it with just a few clicks. Okay, so what we need to do here is create a database. So we're going to create a schema, and we're going to name it Marvijo Wordpress 1, something like that. Enter. Oh, they said we actually end these with semicolons. If we jot in our semicolon there, we'll see that query okay, one row affected. So now we have created our schema called Marvijo underscore WP1. So our database has been created. WordPress only requires a blank database, so we don't need to create any tables that side. Okay, we're going to jot in our database name here, and hopefully everything works. Wow! Alright, Spoggy. You've made it through this part of the installation. WordPress can now communicate with your database. If you are ready, time now to run the installation. Let's go. So while it's running the installation, we should point out that we're able to successfully connect to a container instance from app service that's totally independent. They're not even sharing virtual networks. So we're just going to set something like this. Password. We're going to use a simple password. Don't have to hide it. Actually, we're going to remove this particular resource after this. It says very weak, which is quite good. Confirm use of weak password and email. I'm just going to jot in my email. Okay, let's install WordPress. This is wonderful. It didn't require any complex PHP installations, didn't require any VMs, didn't require any MySQL installations. It was just quick and straightforward. Okay, let's see if we can log in. Okay, we said our username is root and our password is this. Let's see if we can log in. Oh, look at this, guys. So we have our own publicly available, fully qualified domain name that we can access. And then we have our own website that we have up and running. WordPress website, and it looks very fast, to be honest. Oh, it's very fast because we chose a size that's quite fast. This is wonderful. So we have successfully created a WordPress website in Microsoft Azure using an app service and a container instance. Okay, thanks for tuning in. Please don't forget to subscribe and like the video if you really liked it, and you can give me some suggestions or kudos in the comment section. Thank you very much.